Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. This is Shane Pearson with LeadSpace, and today we're going to do a presentation. That's a part two of a series we're doing, the Survival Guide to Sales and Marketing AI. And today we're going to focus on the topic of how to get your customer and prospect data AI ready. And without any delay, let's go ahead and jump in. So first, if you're new to LeadSpace, just a quick little bit about us and what we do. We are an industry recognized AI-powered B2B buyer data platform. And I'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. But the thing we do is really we help people with their large data problems in terms of having good, clean data, always refreshed and enriched for their different solutions. And then we also have solutions that help with targeting, revenue operations, automation. Those won't be things that we'll talk about a lot today. Those topics will be in the upcoming parts of the series where we get into those details. We're also recognized as a pioneer in the B2B customer data platform market and a recognized leader in multiple independent analysis like the Forrester standalone CDP wave from 2021. So let's talk about what we're doing here. This is a 5-part series where what we really want to do is dive in and demystify some things around data, around artificial intelligence or AI and how it's used, and the different topics around that, because AI, machine learning, a lot of things that we do to make it easier to deal with big data have been around for years. There's new things that are always coming up in technology. And what we want to do is try to just talk about this in layman's terms of how, those of us that work in sales and marketing actually make use of this data and then use it to drive results. And I think that's the real thing. Like, how do you actually drive results? And that's what we really want to focus on is results, which for all of us here means, usually driving revenue, driving increased customer education, understanding, and ultimately, succeeding in whatever your day-to-day, week-to-week, quarterly, annual goals are. So if you missed the first part, you can see that on our website, which is just our main LeadSpace resources page, and go watch Making AI Work. And it's a great presentation that kind of sets the stage for the whole series. So let's talk about what it means to get your data, your sales and marketing data AI ready. So the first thing is that in different research we've done and Forrester's done, typically about 4 out of 5 companies say that they're struggling with getting their data AI ready. And so that's all the different aspects that you deal with data, which is you've got different data sources. You've got different data schema. In other words, the data that you have in your sales system, your CRM system, might be different from your marketing automation system. You might be bringing in data from some sources that are less clean. So you're doing form fills, for example, and or you're collecting information at marketing events or sales events, and those are incomplete or data and different levels of information. And so you've got all these different things you're trying to deal with. And if you're like most companies, you've got more data than can be manually managed. And then, of course, you've got the whole issues to deal with of degradation of data over time. And there's a lot of different aspects to this in managing your data. So the first thing is, okay, you got to get your house in order, which means getting things organized so they're consistent. So you've got normalized data that can be used by the different systems and teams. And then, of course, everything needs to be managed. And from that standpoint, we mean there needs to be rules so things are automatically updated. So let's talk about kind of where a lot of you probably are, and then where we want to go. So here's an example we use for kind of where a lot of people are. And this is kind of if this is where you're at, don't feel like you're alone. You're probably where the majority is, and this is what we help people with all the time. So here today, let's just start with this. What's a typical CRM profile for first party data? And so, it's going to have some type of company information. In other words, John Doe works at Acme Tile and is in marketing. So that's some of his information. And then you've got the contact information and information about him specifically. So email, phone, and you think that he's in Chicago. So, but there's all kinds of other information that you don't have. And I think that's the big thing that people deal with is when you have, say, inaccurate or incomplete data. So you don't know anything about this company, for example, or what they do. And we don't actually know if the company's right, the title or the division's right, or the phone number. So however you got this information, at just looking at it, there's no way to know if it's accurate, and you're making decisions on that. And say you're promoting this as a lead, that means you're now spending money on it as a company. And so a lot of what we were trying to do with having accurate data and processes here is to make sure that when you make decisions to work a lead, for example, or use information, that it's accurate, because we don't want to spend money or time on inaccurate information, which is not going to be taking us to the result we want, which is we want to sell somebody something. So that's where you get into the systems you have, or people. If it's just manual workflows, you're going to be trying to figure out if this is correct, and that can be really hard at times if you don't have automation being used to do routing and to do lead enrichment. So what a lot of people end up doing, and again, if this is you, understand, and this happens in lots of places. So now you're going to say, okay, well, we do have a data problem. Let's just do a one-time enrichment. And so there's lots of ways this is done. There's all these little tools that let you enrich one record at a time, or say upload a list and update those. And you get your information and you go. Or you work with some different vendors to do spot buys on specific lists, and you go. So again, where we get into issues with this is that there's different data that you may be getting access to or not getting access to. So the first thing is you may still have incomplete profiles. You may have profiles that in this moment are accurate, but because you're doing one-time enrichment and not regularly updating, and what we talk about in processes are doing updates on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis, or a bit-based basis, based on what your workflows are. So if you do a one-time enrichment, the second you've done it, your data is starting to go out of date because you're not regularly updating the data, and you don't have processes in place to do that. So, this is where a lot of people are today. They're doing the one-time enrichment with third-party data to fill in or get more information. Now, the other thing that happens, and this is really interesting because even large companies have these processes. And when we talk about one-time enrichment for first-party data, and the difference, third-party data is data that providers like LeadSpace provide, where we're updating or adding information to data you don't have, or giving you net new companies and contacts, for example, that meet your criteria. First-party data is data that you create and that you have added to your systems. So this is customer information, prospect information. It's different types of product information, all the different things that would be in a CRM system or a marketing system. So this is always being added in most cases, and where people sometimes will be trying to, for example, address the issue, say, okay, well, hey, every quarter we're going to ask our sales and marketing team to spend a certain amount of time going through and doing data cleanup. And that is part of a job, but it's also something that's not real efficient. And so we'll see with lots of people where they might be spending 50, 100 hours a quarter doing basically manual and error prone types of data cleanup because it's only as good as what the person puts in. And so again, this might be something where it solves a problem a little bit, but it gets very quickly out of date and it's very error prone. Okay, so now you've done your different enrichments. You've done whether it's a third party, first party, one-offs, or done some buys, data buys. Now you've still got the issue that we didn't even address because we mostly just talked about, okay, what if we're in a CRM or a marketing system? We didn't deal with what if you've got data across multiple systems? How do you normalize it? How do you unify your data and keep it consistent? How do you integrate data if you're starting to bring in new data either from other sources or you've got multiple divisions or all the different things that happen? And then of course keep it up to date across all these data sources. Well, that falls on your ops team, and they can only do so much because again, the data is getting out of date as we talk. So typically, this is where things either start to fall apart or they just get they get frustrating because it's not fun to work with out of date data or data that's wrong. And then you've also just got normal things that happen in business. So John, our example, John Doe there, he changes jobs and goes to a different company. Acme Tile gets acquired, and your sales territories change. So now you've got people, getting different companies and profiles for people to work with, and they have no idea if any of that first or third party data is accurate because it's been kind of done as a one-offs and manual. And so you get a lot of noise in the system, so to speak. So there's just an example. So let's talk about what sales and marketing AI ready data looks like from both a process standpoint and then also a workflow standpoint of how sales and marketing can work together. So where it needs to start is the concept of having defined profiles for company and people. And that's a nice, simple, phrase there, but it means a lot more than that. So when we talk about that, you really need to have this concept of a unified profile for a company or person that supports all your different systems and workflows. And so this is where we get into the first part where this is typically why people are working with things like a CDP or a solution like LeadSpace. So your natural systems have their own data definitions. So your CRM system, if you're using Salesforce, has its own setup that's managed by one team. Now, depending on which marketing tools or sales and marketing tools you're using, they can have their own schemas and data requirements. And these things have all typically at most companies grown on their own. So those things need to be managed, and you need to have profiles that can support what their data needs are. And so a lot of those tools have their own capabilities, but they can be very manual, very point-to-point integration. And so what we want to do is provide a way to manage those profiles and manage that data to keep it consistent for your company and people. And then leads would be another object if we throw that in across all those systems. So that's the first step. And that really is a joint, it's a joint cross-functional discussion where we need to understand what the needs are that each system needs, each team needs, what are the things that drive sales workflows, sales and marketing workflows that are joint, and say marketing workflows, because those can all be different. Okay, so where that leads then is a real detailed discussion about what your key profile fields are that both drive workflows, but also just as importantly, drive metrics. So in other words, understanding both how your processes are working, how you're driving your funnel, and then what information is really needed to understand which companies and which people are your best targets and or are engaging with you. So the top half of this is really the company data per se and or system data per se. So it's what's the firmographics data, which is just company data. So that's where are the companies at, what industry are they in, all the information that you have. Demographics, then same thing for people. And then technographics is the technical signals, data signals that we know about companies. The bottom part of this is where we start to get into more details on what we will just generally refer to as targeting, which we'll deal with more in the next session that is coming up after part two. But personas are more complete definitions for people in terms of what they do, type of work, what departments they're in, different types of activities they do that we provide and maintain. And then intent is people that are showing interest in specific topics. So, baseball is a good example. Baseball could be a topic. Someone's interested in baseball. And so there's both third party and first party intent where people show interest in certain topics. And that's one way to understand if someone's in the market for the type of products that you sell. Now, intent is really great. A lot of people use that, and we do a lot with it. But where we see intent is more useful, and again, this will be the later topics, but we're talking about it here because it's part of the profile. These things all need to be understood together. So fit and engagement are ways that we do additional specific targeting. Fit being, is a company a good fit for what you sell based on who you sold to historically? And engagement is where what people are interacting with you based on your marketing programs that you're running, whether that's web, email, or the different ways that you engage with people. So the idea here is really that you have to have the fields understood to one, keep them up to date. And then those fields are what we use when we start doing scoring and targeting with personas, intent, fit, engagement. So these two things really work together. And then a big benefit that we have, and we'll talk a little bit more about, is we provide this in one extensible profile. So we can handle all of these in one type of data that drives through LeadSpace. We can interact with other systems and push data into them or pull it out, which is really different than some of the solutions that are out there. And so that's something to think about when you're getting your data ready is, what are you going to have to interact with? It's really not often that you have just a single solution application where everything sits. Now, the last part is where this is how you scale the solution. So now we've got our profiles defined, we understand what they work across. We've got all our scoring and other capabilities, but this needs to be automated. So your data's got to get cleaned and normalized, enriched, scored, and managed across all these workflows and systems. So I know this is like one slide. It covers a lot, and let me just kind of double click into a couple of items here. So when we talk about how we solve this problem, it's the first part is this active profiling concept where you understand your companies, all the data fields that you need to drive your workflows and your metrics across your company. So your sales and marketing workflows, and then also how you drive the revenue. And this is where there's a lot of work that's done. And we'll talk about how we combine both profile information and scoring and targeting as we get into the series. So in this example, the other thing I really want to point out is in B2B, if you cannot connect a person to a company, then that person information is not useful. And so that's a big part of being able to define these company and people profiles, have them be able to be automatically verified. And then when the information changes, have those relationships also be automatically updated. So this is where in our typical setup, we have about 180 fields that are available to drive across all those topics that I was just going through in different detail so that you can understand, who's the company or person. You have all their correct information. The first party and third party data is merged. And then most importantly, we're able to bring in all the predictive scores and around personas, intent, fit, and engagement in one profile that can be driven consistently across your different systems. So that is a really important part. And for this slide, what I just wanted to really hit home is that when you're defining these profiles, the point of this is to really drive your funnel optimization, and revenue management. So you've got these buckets to think about, which is active profile management is what are the profiles and the profile signals. Then what are the profile scoring that is added, which is something we do dynamically. So that's where we get into the different aspects of, what's the right company, who are the right people, and are they engaging with you? Are they showing intent? All the different types of scoring we do, and then maintaining that across your entire funnel from top to bottom. And being able to do that means us being able to present the right information based on what system you're working in at your company, but also being able to present who the right people are depending on where you're working in the funnel and the criteria that you're using. So when we look at that, and it's a little bit of eye chart, but the point here was to just in one view show the different ways this breaks up to into terms of functionality, and then how that is needs to be available across the different systems you're working. So being able to work across third-party data, first-party data at a common level, and then be able to activate it in your different CRM systems, your marketing automation systems, push it out to ad networks or other on-demand networks that you need to push segmented data into. And then we also have our own tools that are standalone in terms of a SaaS-based application that you can use, and that are embedded into the different systems, the different CRMs and marketing automation systems. And so it's really been a consistent ability to normalize, activate, and manage that data across your enterprise. So typically the types of things that we see, and I'm going to focus on that top line because we're talking about profile management today and getting your data in order. The bottom line is going to refer to the capabilities of things we do when we start getting into the targeting and revenue management. So on the profile side, though, this is what sets it all up. Like if you don't get the profiles right, if you don't get your data house in order, as we said, then it's really hard to get results farther down the line in a repeatable way. So our typical customer that we work with, what we'll see them do first of all is have a huge savings in data costs. And that comes from a couple different areas. The first one is that a lot of times their data costs are not consistent. You've got individual buys in, say, one division or one business unit or one region. And there's a lot of waste in those types of approaches that are one-off that we talked about before. So by getting everything to whether it's our data or we're coordinating the data that's being brought in, because we have an open platform and we can bring in other third-party data besides our own. That's what we typically see is people will go from, maybe they're using 10, 12, 20 data vendors, and we'll help them consolidate to LeadSpace plus 3 or 4 specialty vendors that we can integrate their data. The other thing we see is a lot of simplification of systems. So one of the things that will help people do is consolidate their customer data. So instead of having definitions like we talked about that are different in all these systems, we'll get them a unified profile that works across all their systems. And so we see people with a dozen or 20 or more different customer sales and marketing systems. And what we want to do is get them to a unified profile and approach that can work across all of those. We also help people work with finding, where their white space is. And so that's looking at and modeling your existing customer data, helping you find, who are companies and contacts that meet your go-to-market. And so there's a lot of capabilities we do there. And on average, we help people grow their customer data set by doing that through different means like lookalikes and also model approaches. And probably the last part, which is, again, coming back to if you don't have your profiles right, it's hard to do lead to account matching and do it in an automated way. And so what we'll see is people can really increase both their speed to do lead to account matching and their accuracy. And maybe what gets lost in this is by automating as much of that as possible, it frees people up because they're not manually matching in some cases, hundreds or thousands of leads that aren't getting matched because of either bad data or inaccurate data, or they're just getting left behind because they're not matchable in an easy way and a scalable way. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming today in this part of the series, which was how to get your house in order. And so if we go back to the beginning, it was three main things, which was defining what your company and person profiles look like. And again, it's important to understand that's across your sales and marketing workflows. And we start with that because then the next thing we can do is that we can define what the key fields are that drive your sales and marketing workflow and metrics. And then last, we need to automate the end-to-end life cycle of our B2B data. And so with that, I hope this was informative for you. And what I want to do is give a shout out to the next part of this series, which will be get started with AI targeting for sales and marketing. Because as much as it's fun to talk about the data part, what we really want to do is get to putting the data to work for us so that we can more effectively interact and communicate with our customers on our market, and of course, drive growth. And so that'll be coming up on May 31st by my co-worker Felix. And so thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. I do appreciate it.